All right, folks. If you are just joining us, we have an excellent panelist here with us today. Well, not panelist, panelist of one. So I will let us get started here in a second. My name is Nicole Trevina Flores. I'm the one that bugs you on all the emails about all of our various events, so I appreciate you joining me. We are continuing with our Lunch and Learn series, and we will pick this back up in January. So we are thrilled to have Dr. Christopher R. Banks joining us today. And I'm going to go ahead and read you a bio and then just let him take over. So Dr. Christopher R. Banks is presently the director of the International Relations BA program at Union College in Lincoln here. Dr. Banks holds an honors Bachelor's of Arts degree in International Relations from Brown University, a master's in International Affairs from Columbia University, and a doctorate of philosophy and politics at the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom. Dr. Banks' professional experiences have included work on the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, Department of Defense Stabilization Capabilities and Afghan Police Reform at the United States Government Accountability Office, assisting the U.S. Congressional and United Nations Liaison Offices of the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and has completed analytical and volunteer work with several businesses and think tank organizations, including the Washington University on Near East Policy and Corporate Council on Africa. Dr. Banks is originally from Silver Spring, Maryland, and has happily resided in Lincoln since 2015. So thank you for joining us, and I will let you go ahead and get started.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Greetings to everyone today. After that wonderful biography, I have two cuddly teddy bears behind my shoulder. You know, my 3-year-old, she just had her birthday this past week, so that and Christmas, and you know, the house is filled with toys. So, but I'm very pleased to be visiting with everyone today. The topic, how did we get here, I think is a very appropriate topic, given the fact that I believe that in the United States, we as the American public are still kind of, it doesn't matter where you fall politically, we're still kind of going through the shock of withdrawing from Afghanistan. And this is a talk that I've given already a couple of times since August of this year. Before, as was said before, I'm director of the International Relations program at Union College here in Lincoln. And we were grappling with this. I teach a class on U.S. war on terror. And now I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's time to retire that course now, right? Because we have exited Afghanistan, but we're still going through the withdrawal symptoms, sometimes denial. We're going through the questions of who we are as a world superpower. And I thought that it would be very good in the Global Lunch and Learn session to address these topics again with you today. I'll only speak for roughly around 20 minutes, you know, or just a little over. And the rest of the time, I'm happy to open it up to question and answers. Really interested to hear from yourselves on your thoughts on what does it mean for U.S. superpower status, us exiting out of Afghanistan. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it something that we're going to pay for later on? I'm very interested to hear thoughts from the attendees today. But let's go right into it. How do we get here? This is the question that pretty much entered my mind when I saw just the scurrying back and forth of U.S. Marines and other U.S. servicemen going into the U.S. Embassy, to which, if I can just state here and now, you know, I've been to Afghanistan. I've been to the U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan. I was part of, this was during my time at the Government Accountability Office, 2007. We spent several weeks over in Kabul, really kind of grilling questions to the Afghan Minister of Defense on the training of Afghan National Police. And some of the takeaways, and there were many, but from that trip, some of the takeaways, revolved around the fact that there was no unity in Afghanistan. One of the mistakes, and I'll speak about this very shortly, that I think that we committed in Afghanistan. We had good intentions. We wanted to build a nation state. We wanted to, you know, have an Afghan society framed into how we understand it here in the West. There's a nation state, there's a president, there's a national assembly. What I'm going to put forward today is that the Afghan society was so far from that. You're basically taking societies that were largely agricultural, largely with animal husbandry, largely traditional, with their own modes and ways of knitting society together. And what I'm putting forward today is the fact that we should have done more of a blend. What we tried to do was kind of a replacement, or at least setting Western institutions on top of traditional institutions. My two takeaways to put forward to you today: one, we never truly understood what knit Afghan society together, and two, we never made space for blending it with Westernized institutions so that those Westernized institutions became their own. These two oversights contributed largely to how we misunderstood Afghan society, and therefore it led to, partially at least, and maybe to a great part, our mission not being fully accomplished there. So again, how do we get here? Discussion on the U.S. experience in Afghanistan, 1979, 2021. So the first thing is, sorry. Oh, there we go. All right. Forgive the pictures are a bit large, obviously. It's just kind of zooming in so that we can all see really small text, so apologies. But we've seen these pictures before. My purpose in showing you this slide first is not to be alarmist in any way. And I trust that most of us, if not all of us here, remember September 11th and remember how devastating it was. But nevertheless, I just wanted to put forward as a reminder that this is what started our most recent engagement in Afghanistan. We were engaged in Afghanistan before, perhaps some of you in this audience remember, from 1979 to 1989, when the Soviets invaded. Soviets had invaded Afghanistan. We had just lost, geopolitically speaking, our strongest ally in the Shah of Iran next door in the Middle East. Afghanistan, it being kind of in the Central Asian space next to Iran. When in 1979, when the Iranian Revolution pushed out American influence in Iran, the Soviet Union, that time being the height of the Cold War, thought it was a perfect opportunity to enter into Afghanistan and to take advantage of the power vacuum in the region. Christmas Day, December 25th, 1979, while we were celebrating Christmas, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. They figured that we wouldn't really try to counterattack them on Christmas. We'd be too busy. So from December 25th, 1979 until the first quarter of the year, February 1989, when the Soviets pulled out of Afghanistan, there were 10 years when the Soviet Union had troops directly in Afghanistan. So this has been done before, a strong industrialized nation from what's termed the global north goes into Afghanistan to change its society, to influence its government, and to basically try to gain an ally in the region. Why is Afghanistan so important? So many reasons. It's in the nexus, the crossroads of the Middle East, Central Asia, and South Asia. Whoever, for lack of a better word, gains influence, and perhaps there we use the word control, in Afghanistan is in the perfect position in Central Asia to then influence South Asia, so Pakistan, India, Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, right? Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan as well, and then Iran, right? Afghanistan, and we'll see the pictures shortly, also has 5 major rivers that flow out into the surrounding countries. So actually, whoever controls Afghanistan also controls the water supply of several nations around it. Finally, whoever controls Afghanistan also for the great grand prize, controls $8 trillion worth of minerals: gold, copper, uranium, zinc, nickel, diamonds. There are diamonds in the hills of Afghanistan. $8 trillion is nothing to sneeze at. So if you have Afghanistan on your side, for an industrial nation, you have $8 trillion worth of periodic table of elements that can then help your space program, that can help your pharmaceutical industries, that can help so many other, I mean, we're speaking via Zoom on a computer, what have you. Afghanistan has gold. Some of that gold will go into computer chips. So, when people say, well, why are we there? Well, these are some major reasons of why an industrialized country would want to be there. But obviously, just returning here to the slide, we were there because we were attacked on September 11th, the first time that the United States had ever been attacked on the soil of the United States. Remember, Hawaii was not part of the United States when it was attacked in Pearl Harbor, which the anniversary just passed on December 7th. But September 11th, 2001, we were attacked, New York City, Pentagon, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. This started, we went into Afghanistan, so September 11th, and then several months later in early December, we entered into Afghanistan with troops on the ground, right? Boots on the ground, as we call it. And then from December 2011 to August 15th, 2021, what went wrong? What went wrong? We were there for really almost just shy of 20 years, 4 months shy of 20 years. When you put an investment of blood, treasure, and sweat and tears in 20 years, you want to return. You want to say we accomplished something. Instead, what happened was really kind of bitter anger in the US military of a lot of people giving their lives and sacrifice. And what do we have to show for it? Bitter anger in the State Department in DC, bitter anger in the Pentagon with the top brass of US military, the US military, bitter anger with the contractors, bitter anger across major sectors of American political and military societies and government. What happened? So here we have 4 things. What went wrong? We pulled out August 31st. What went wrong? Number 1, attempts to coerce Afghan tribal groups into global consensus of a nation state and its assumed institutional functions. Well, what do I mean by that? We basically tried to take, as I just said earlier, we tried to take a kind of, and I say this in a respectful manner, we tried to take a basically, in some ways, prehistoric society, and we tried to launch them into the 21st century. And we tried to do it in 20 years. That's a tall order. So that's a tall ask. So that first point there is the fact that we attempted to do that, and we faltered in those attempts. And so instead of getting a society that accepted or that could fight against the Taliban, we were never able to break the traditional ties to the Taliban. It was too much too quickly. Number 2, failure to correlate traditional Afghan institutions and cultural norms into the new governing fabric. This for me is a major one. I'll explain it later. The peer-muried model, the student-teacher model. This is like an apprenticeship model in the traditional Afghan sense between an older, established, traditionally educated, usually in the Islamic sphere, older teacher, right, in the 30s, 40s, or 50s, sometimes in their 60s, and the murid, the student, right? So basically, right, it's like a university model without the buildings, okay, right? You have the master and then you have the student. Afghan society had this, and it's critical. It's critical to transition from boyhood to manhood. It cannot be overstated how critical the peer-muried model is to Afghan society. We did not incorporate that into the westernized structure. So there were thousands of years of loyalty to the peer-muried model. And then we had in 20 years a Western model established on top, and we didn't blend the two. We didn't try to blend the two. We tried to get rid of the pyramid model. We said, oh, it's backwards, big deal. You know, they haven't evolved yet. And here's the nation state, and it just didn't work. So that's the second point. Third point, US and allies fostered a culture of economic and institutional dependency. I saw this firsthand. We were out in Jalalabad. I'll show you in a couple of minutes from now. We were out in Jalalabad looking at the Afghan police at their training ground. We took 2 Black Hawks out there, myself and the team I was with from Government Accountability Office. And one of the first things I saw being there, witnessing kind of almost half a day's worth of training, is that people were there for a check. They were not there because they believed in the Afghan nation state. They were there because we paid them to be there. And they had equipment, and so therefore they had respect in society, which is huge in Afghan culture. So they had respect because they had a uniform and the gun to go with it, and they had a check, and that enabled them to feed their families and to have respect in their family household, and that was it. Nobody was there because they wanted to commit themselves to the Afghan state. And the contractors, the U.S. contractors that were there, and heaven bless them, but well, I shouldn't say contractors, I should say the U.S. contractor system. So money is given by Congress to the U.S. Pentagon. That money flows from the U.S. Pentagon to hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of contractors who then are to implement what the U.S. Pentagon wants to see on the ground with kind of like civil engagement with Afghan society. Contractors are there. Not everyone's making $100,000 a year, but right, 60, 70,000, 80,000 at least. And you know, you're kind of thinking, hey, I'm here to make money and to collect on danger pay. Not all contractors are thinking this, but you know, there is a culture of that. And so we're thinking about how to pay for, you know, the family back home. We're not really committing ourselves to understanding Afghan society. No, not 100% of contractors felt that way, but I would definitely put it around 40, 50%, at least a plurality to half. I'm tempted to even put it at 60%. And so if the loyalties are to kind of like the pocketbook and not to Afghan society, then there's a gap there. And then finally, like I said, well, that goes into point 4, continuation of what's called the beast, the Pentagon culture, the contracting culture there, right? These are some pictures here. We'll just have 10 minutes more, just kind of presenting some of the things that I saw when over there. This is back in 2008. This is a trip in 2008. We were there for almost, well, about 3 weeks. And we toured, we were at Camp Eggers in Kabul, the main U.S. Army base camp there. Traveled back and forth between Eggers and Phoenix. Then we went out into different parts of Kabul, and then out to Jalalabad, and then to a couple of villages to kind of see the traditional model. So here, what I'd like to point out to you here in these 2 pictures, here, you can see the cursor, I'm kind of circling, that's the then Afghan Ministry of Defense. Our job there was the money coming from the US Congress going to the different contractors, and then from the contractors into Afghan civil society. Our job was to make sure that the money was being appropriated correctly, that money was going to what it was slated to go for. That was our job from the Government Accountability Office. And we took a tour of several villages and towns with the Afghan Minister of Defense at that time, to make sure that, you know, the money going through his office was being spent correctly on Afghan police and what have you. Now, some of the money going through the Afghan Ministry of Defense went to build new buildings and chairs and, you know, this fan over here at a traditional jirga, Jirgya, jirgya. A jirgya is a traditional Afghan council. Traditionally, and with respect we say this, traditionally, it tends to be within a more traditional village setting. It is comprised of the middle-aged to older men of the village, and different jirgiyas come together from the region when they really need to solve a major problem, to discuss it and to come to an agreement, to come to a verdict. It's a judicial council. It's a judicial council. Again, we built areas, meeting places, what have you, and it worked at sometimes, and sometimes it may, it wasn't enough that people were going to switch their loyalties from the Taliban to the US. That's my point here. Putting a building up, giving new chairs, admirable, definitely. I mean, I was very impressed with how much we built over there in short space of a time. This is 2008, so this is 7 years in, and we had already constructed hundreds of these jirga meeting spaces around Afghanistan. It's excellent. There was nothing wrong with that at all. But it tended not to reach into the depths of how Afghanistan worked. So these two pictures kind of just show jirgas meeting in the space that the United States military constructed. This photograph of the construction site, another meeting space in Chapahar. Chapahar was a village. Shura means meeting space. So in Chapahar, this was being built. Again, lots of things of kind of building society. But again, I think maybe a little more blending should have been accomplished in order to have the different ethnic groups of Afghan society to claim the nation state as their own. Some did, but I would think much more was needed on that front. And I'm sure there are lots of people who disagree with me, but this is just what I would postulate and put forward. Here was the Afghan police training site. This was kind of a large part of this trip in 2008 of our mission there from the GAO. As you can see, right, uniforms, everything kind of, that the US is helping to finance, was helping to finance then. And there was pride. There was pride in a sense of purpose. There was pride in a sense of having respect. There was pride in a sense of being supported by the United States, okay? But once again, that did not mean that there was a clean break from traditional society and all of a sudden it's like, yep, the West is the best and we're going to accept everything lock, stock, and barrel. It was, we will accept what helps engender strength and respect, everyone's personal respect within society, within their families, within their neighborhoods, what have you. But there wasn't that, Afghanistan has at least 12 ethnic groups. There wasn't by no means, this wasn't the glue to hold 12 ethnic groups together. And then these are just further pictures. Again, this is in Jalalabad. In taking the helicopter out from Kabul to Jalalabad, about a 30-minute helicopter flight. What was very, very poignant, almost very poetic in my mind. Perhaps I'm too much of a romantic thinking about things like this. But the helicopter rounded one of the many, many, many tens of thousands of mountains in Afghanistan. And I just happened to look, just randomly, and saw an old rusted Soviet helicopter hanging by its tail off of a cliff. I don't know. I mean, Afghanistan doesn't get hurricanes, but if there was hurricane force wind, it would have just tumbled into the valley, half a mile below. But it was still hanging there. It was rusted out from the time the Soviets had invaded Afghanistan. And my eyes just happened to catch it, just randomly looking out the window of the Black Hawk helicopter, just happened to catch it. And I said to myself, there goes that lesson, right? Soviet Union has been here before. They tried to impose communism on the Afghan people. It did not work. We're now here. What lessons can we take from the period of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and not repeat those lessons and therefore not have, rusted out helicopters, but we're beyond that. There's billions of dollars worth of equipment that have now fallen into Taliban hands. Here, again, attempts to coerce Afghan tribal groups into a nation state. Here's a map, as you can see. They're listing 9 major ones here. Here we're looking at 12, 13, 14. Forgive my voice, sorry. That was a bit long. Ethnic group map. Pashtuns are the major ethnic group in Afghanistan, comprising about 40% of the population, roughly. That's a conservative estimate. You have a lot of Pashtuns that say they range around 60% of the population. I'm not here to take a particular side on the debate, but conservatively, at least a plurality of the population at 40%. After Pashtuns on the northern portion of Afghanistan, we have Tajiks, Kyrgyz, Turkmens, Uzbeks, and as you can see, they have their kind of co-ethnic groups across the border into Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. So they kind of form a plurality in the northern part of Afghanistan. What you will see in times past, and even when we pulled out this time, is that you go back Washington Post, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Chicago Tribune, Boston Globe, you'll really see in these newspapers, as we were driving down towards the deadline of August 31st pulling out, then it was this aspect of, hopefully the Northern Alliance will hold on. The Northern Alliance are these groups, these ethnic groups. It did not hold on. It all fell in simple weeks. The Taliban, please note, is a Pashtun-dominated group, okay? And by the way, the Taliban grew out of, just to be very clear on the history of how the Taliban formed, again, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan 1979 to 1989. How could we fight against the Soviet Union? Did we send US troops? No, the American public was not ready to see US troops in Afghanistan fighting the Soviets. We did not want the Cold War to turn hot. So what we did was that we gathered a lot of young men from age 14 to at least into their 20s and 30s, led by, again, traditional leaders of society in their 40s and 50s. This is in all throughout 1979 to 1989. And since the Soviet Union was officially an atheistic country, then we basically provided funding and we provided armaments to the Mujahideen, again, these young Afghan men, Mujahideen, and basically, through them, countered the Soviet invasion of the country. These Mujahideen, after the Soviets pulled out in 1989, they became the Taliban. The word Taliban means student. The word Taliban means student. Taliban, Murid are pretty much analogous terms. So the word Taliban means student, and these students grew up, right? People grow up, and they became in their 20s and 30s and 40s. In the 1990s is when they took over the country, right? So in 1990s, this group of Mujahideen that we supported to fight the Soviets in the 80s, 79 to 89, became the Taliban in the 1990s when they became a bit older, into their 30s and 40s. And they were already radicalized from that invasion period, Soviet invasion period. And with the radicalization, they attempted to impose that onto Afghan society. Those who are aware of traditional Afghan society, when I say traditional Afghan society, there's so many versions because we have, excuse me, we have so many ethnic groups. But still, even larger Pashtun society in Afghanistan is not as radicalized. The Taliban became radicalized a lot through the material coming out of Saudi Arabia, that, or imams of Saudi Arabia. Osama bin Laden was originally from Saudi Arabia. He fought in Afghanistan in the 80s. He was part of that radicalization. Traditional Afghan society in the Islamic understanding isn't so radicalized. The suicide bombing was not a part of Afghan society. When that started, it was taught by outside influences. namely from Pakistan or other areas. Pakistan's in South Asia, but Pakistan or the Middle East. Suicide bombing is not a part of Afghan Islamic society traditionally, but now it is. Now it is. That was brought in from the outside. Here in the graphic to the left here, excuse me, to the right, you see Afghanistan and Pakistan together. Again, Pashtuns here is the light yellow or light brownish yellow, right, sand color, and you can see they're on both sides of the border. And I like including this map because I just want to get across the fact that, again, people are loyal to their ethnic group. They're loyal to the traditional norms of their ethnic group. The nation state is a Western concept. So in order for us to really kind of, attempt, as we did for 20 years, to attempt to bring Afghan society into the concept of Westernized nation state, I mean, where was Osama bin Laden found? He was found in Pakistan. He was protected by ethnic Pashtun elements in Rawalpindi Army Base in Pakistan. They were like, wow, what's he doing in Pakistan? Well, the Pashtuns are on both sides of the border. He was safe. It wasn't like, oh my goodness, you're crossing a border. What border? Like it's all Pashtun territory. So this is something obviously the U.S. military knew. They knew from well in advance, but it made the fight that much harder. All right, and here finally we're getting to in the presentation here. What we find here is the Pir-Murid model. Just go through it quickly. So you'll have something. So we look at Afghanistan and we're like, okay, it's Muslim, right? Well, we have to understand there are two categories in the Islamic world, roughly speaking. Sunni, which is 85% of Muslims, they believe, this is hopefully not an oversimplification of the definition, but Sunni Muslims believe that leadership in the Islamic world can come from the most righteous person in the community. So they don't have to be of the bloodline of Muhammad. Sunnis believe that. That's 85% of the Muslim world. Shia, the other category in the Muslim world, broad category, let's say, 15% of the Muslim world, Shia, S-H-I-A, they believe that leadership should only come from those who are directly from the bloodline of Muhammad, okay? Muhammad being the founding prophet in Islam. Afghan society is generally Sunni. The Hazara, if I can just show here quickly, the Hazara, right here in the pink, right here where I'm circling, the Hazara are Shia, okay? This is why the Hazara are generally discriminated against in Afghan society, because they are the main Shia group. The rest of the groups tend to be Sunni, right, following the majority of the Muslim world. Sufism is a more mystical appropriation and understanding of Sunni Islam. So what is Sufism? Sufism, kind of, if you understand the whirling dervishes of Turkey, I don't have time to bring something up here today, but it's kind of like, engaging in Islamic understandings and tenets in a more mystical level. Fundamentalists, here's my point, fundamentalists like the Taliban are against Sufism. Sufism includes maybe playing music and through that playing of music, getting a greater understanding of the divine. Fundamentalists, right, such as the Taliban, are dead set against that. They do not believe in that. They are against Sufism. But here's the point. Sufism is the glue that holds Afghanistan society together, right? Right? Sufism holds Afghanistan society. It's been there for centuries. You're not going to get rid of it. The Taliban's not going to get rid of it. And we're not going to get rid of it. Now, that's not to imply that we try to get rid of it. I'm not stating that the US tried to get rid of it. I'm not accusing us of that. The US did not try to get rid of Sufism. But here's our blind spot. We didn't use it as the societal glue for helping Afghans to be loyal to a nation state. We just said, oh, okay, that's in the village. We're not going to bother with that. Hey, look, here's a building for your new parliament. parliament. Okay. And then we called it, a Grand Jurgia. And we were like, okay, we named it a Jurgia. Great, they'll be loyal to that. It's just like the Jurgia in the village, except it's bigger and it's funded by Congress, right? No. Really, we have to go into hearts and minds. When the U.S. military talked about winning hearts and minds, Sufism would have been a big part of that. But my argument is we did not really give it the precedence that we should have in taking this glue of Afghan society and engaging it into the Western institutions. If we had done that in some sort of systematic way, people would have recognized their traditions in the Western institution and perhaps would have pushed back against the Taliban a little more broadly. So again, I write here, Afghan Sufism, deeply important glue, in quotes, in the structure of Afghan society. The peer-murid model, the Sufi teacher is a peer, the student is a murid. Okay, it's like metal shop without the metal. Okay, right? You're entering into an apprenticeship. The Sufi teacher guides you to greater knowledge. He initiates you into manhood, right? Through him teaching you. This is how you become an upstanding member of Afghan society. We did not incorporate this. We didn't incorporate this. We said to become an upstanding member of Afghan society, here's a bank, here are all these westernized features. No problem, keep the westernized features, but we should have included the backbone of Afghan society so that they recognize themselves in those features. And I don't think we did that enough. I know there are people who disagree, but I don't think we did that enough. Also, in the West, we separate religion and state, and we say, oh, this is how we are to evolve, to separate religion and state. This is Afghanistan, folks. And Islam broadly doesn't separate religion and state. So, that was something that we just had to accept, that there was no separation of religion and state in Afghanistan, and there wasn't going to be. Like, there wasn't before us when we were there for 20 years, and there's no separation now. So we should have just kind of accepted that and worked that into the point. Just closing out here in the next minute. So, there's a debate on how much Afghan society was dependent upon U.S. Well, I was very much writing reports on these things. Afghan society was, of course, dependent on U.S. funding, obviously, undeniable. But when was there going to be that transition? Well, let me actually correct myself slightly here. There was always talk in the U.S. military. We met with lieutenant generals in Kabul and different people of the top brass in Kabul when kind of writing a report on the Afghan police reform. Again, back in 2008. Generals, they understood your military leadership in Afghanistan and even in the Pentagon. They understood that they didn't want dependency, right? They didn't want the kind of 12 ethnic groups of Afghan society to just sit back and say the Americans will do everything and wait forever. But they were also fighting a war. I mean, that's what militaries are for. They're there to fight a war. And slipping through the cracks, my argument is that slipping through the cracks, we didn't have enough attention paid to what does that transition really look like, and what are the absolute steps to get there. You had different NGOs and different other contracting groups that were thinking various transitional models. We didn't really have a major transitional model, except for perhaps I should say coming from the State Department. But even then, again, it was, well, here are the westernized institutions and they should just accept them. And why won't they accept them? They need to accept them because we need to get out of here, right? That mindset really did us harm, I believe. And then contractors, I've discussed this already. Here's a picture of Roslyn, Virginia, just outside of DC. And here's a guy who kind of looks like a cross between Crocodile Dundee and Rambo. But the fact of the matter is that, again, we being American government and the political military process, we leaned heavily on contractors. Fine, this is not the first time. Ever since World War II, we've been leaning heavily on military contractors. It's just a staple of U.S. Pentagon culture. fine. It's never going to change. I'm not arguing, trying to say, oh, it should change. It's not going to change. But when it came to Afghanistan, the gap was there where contractors were doing their job. Okay, they were doing their job. So in no way, I'm not insinuating the contractors were not doing their job. I'm just saying that contractors being there, the gap still existed on, which contractor was looking at the Piri Muri model. I don't know of any. I don't know of any. And that wasn't considered worthy enough to fund, right? And so therefore it doesn't get funding. No one pays attention to it, yet it's a huge blind spot. And the contractor is just doing what they're told to do. And the money is coming from the United States, and the Afghans are showing up for the check. And you can see that you have this gap. No one's looking at the Piri Muri model. No one's looking at how to incorporate it well. And so that's my point there. The contracting system did not help us to really focus on what we needed to focus on so that we could actually have a clean transition, right? And then again, the report is here. If anybody wants to look at the report, and that's the basic takeaway. The basic takeaway is, why did we fail in Afghanistan? Yes, there are many reasons, but among them, we could have utilized better, in my opinion, a better blend of traditional Afghan pillars of society, not just jirgia, but philosophies. We should have taken those philosophies into the westernized institutions. We shouldn't have made a cleavage between this is the West, and if you want to evolve, you accept it, and if you don't accept it, well, then we're not going to fund it, right? And that left a huge gap that then the Taliban went in and filled. Now, just to close, does a broader Afghan society welcome the Taliban? No, they don't welcome the Taliban. We saw people dying trying to get on planes as U.S. military was exiting. It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking, right? People don't want the Taliban because, again, the Taliban is anti-Sufi, one of their major points, right? So they're not closer to Afghan society and philosophies than we are. The issue is that if we had adopted some of those philosophies in our projects, then the Afghan people at large, citizenry, no matter what the ethnic group, would have been a little more loyal to our side of things. And the whole system wouldn't have collapsed so rapidly as it did. The system collapsed because there was a gap that neither the Taliban nor we fulfilled. If we fulfilled that gap, it wouldn't have collapsed as rapidly. So that's my major point. So at this time, I think, just to open it up to anyone's comments, questions, thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Banks. That was incredibly interesting. I truly appreciate you sharing with us. Questions from the group?
Yeah, I have a comment and question.
Please.
Hey, Doc, that was a terrific presentation. Yeah, my comment is, yeah, we needed to win the hearts and minds, and we came up with the technocratic solution. That was no solution at all, right? Thinking we could bring scientists and engineers, but as you said, not winning the hearts and minds of the people. Oftentimes in uses of history, we talk about ancient tribal hatreds. For example, Muslims versus Indians, Hutus versus Rwandans, Tutsis versus, Zionists versus Palestinians. Are these ancient tribal hatreds in Afghanistan between these different ethnic groups you talked about, or are these more recent conventions?
No, excellent. Yeah, excellent question. And sorry, your name again, sir?
Dr. Saul Cohn, I hear a sociology SCC.
Nice, thank you. I appreciate you being here. From a broad kind of, and obviously I'm not an anthropologist, obviously, right? My background is political science, international relations, geopolitical structures, right? But in that, the courses in which I teach over at Union College here in Lincoln, I finishing up a course called Africa's Global Emergence, looking at the geopolitical understandings of the African continent, because the African continent has some of the largest resource revenues in the world. My point is that one of the first things I tried to do is I tried to take us in the Western mindset to understand exactly what you pointed out, to understand those ethnic rivalries. The reason I bring up the African continent is because it is a perfect case of, look at Ethiopia, look at the Ethiopian Civil War. We're like, oh, Ethiopia, there's a border around it. It's a nation state. Good night. No, it's the Tigray fighting the Amhara with the Oromo thrown in. And these are the three major groups with 12 others. So to bring it to Afghanistan, again, you're absolutely right. I would like to give credit where credit is due. At least in my discussions back in 2008 with US military leadership at Camp Eggers and at Camp Phoenix, it wasn't that they did not know this. They knew this. They knew this. But there was the State Department knew this. We did several meetings over at the State Department with the US ambassador to Afghanistan and his team and what have you. They knew this. But again, and my background is international relations. We are shaped, we are taught in the West to think about nations like France and Italy and Germany, right? And these are nations that have a dominant ethnic group. Like the dominant ethnic group in France are the French. The dominant ethnic group in Germany are the Germans. Now, you can say that the dominant ethnic group in Afghanistan are the Pashtuns, and there are many Pashtuns who will very much agree with you, right? But, does that mean that then I don't consider the Turkmen or the Uzbeks? No, I'd be a fool to do so. And I'd like to draw the attention back, because your question is excellent, to the fact that the Taliban is a heavily Pashtun group, ethnically speaking, okay? It's a Pashtun majority group, the Taliban. Who are the holdouts? If I can point here, there are four major, who are the holdouts against the Taliban in Afghanistan proper, indigenous Afghans? It was the people of the north. So the Uzbeks, the Turkmens, so just to point out, the Tajiks are in the yellow here. I don't know if everyone can see my cursor. Tajiks are in the yellow here. Brown are the Uzbeks. Green over here are the Turkmens, right? They're not Pashtun, they're anti-Pashtun, but guess what? They don't have the numbers. They don't have the numbers. They don't have the numbers. If Afghanistan included Turkmenistan proper, Uzbekistan proper, Tajik proper, Kyrgyzstan proper, I guarantee you there'd be no Taliban, because everyone would go with their co-ethnic group and absolutely go down to Kandahar and crush the Pashtuns, and that would be that. But unfortunately, that's not the way history works. Most of these areas were traditionally part of the Soviet Union, Turkmens and Uzbeks and Tajiks, leaving a minority of these groups in Afghanistan proper. They do not outnumber the Pashtuns, and the Pashtuns pretty much, they dominate the South, for sure. They dominate, I mean, you can see where they are, the purple here. And they dominate the South. It's a crescent from Herat to Kabul. They dominate that crescent, the Southern Crescent. Let me also point out one other quick thing. There are four major cities in Afghanistan. You can see them here. Mazar-e-Sharif in the north. It is in the Uzbek region. Herat is in the Pashtun region. Kandahar is in the Pashtun region. Kabul is in the Pashtun region. Out of four major cities, three of them, including the capital, are located in Pashtun areas. Where was the heaviest fighting? Where did our Marines, where did we have the greatest loss of American military life fighting? Around Kandahar. That's the heart of the crescent. So, your question is really excellent. The summary of my answer to your question is, we in the West need to understand this more. Again, the military leadership, I'm not going to say they didn't understand this. Of course they did. They understood it very well. But, it's kind of hard. Did the contractors understand this? Maybe yes. But when it came time to implement things on the ground, there were gaps. There were gaps. Sorry, a bit of a long answer to your question, but we could have done better in that area. Absolutely. And the Pir Murid model is a heavily Pashtun model that was kind of adopted by several other groups around the Pashtun areas of Afghanistan. But that Pir Murid model is the Pashtun model. So the Taliban is mostly Pashtun. The Pir Murid model is mostly Pashtun model. If we adopted the Pir Murid model, we would have adopted more of the hearts and minds of the Pashtuns. Then they would have taken up arms against the Taliban, because they're like, hey, the United States is not so much of a it's a foreign force, of course, the United States, but it's a foreign force that respects the pillars of our society. They understand our philosophies. You do not understand our Sufi philosophy, even though you are Pashtun, and we would have pushed back. I would have picked up a gun as a regular Pashtun citizen, and I would have fired on the Taliban. But I didn't fire on the Taliban because I'm like, you know what, blood's thicker than water. You know, if I have to go somewhere, I'm going to go with the people that are here at home, not the people who are leaving to go back to Washington. You know, so that's at least how I see it. I know there are lots of debates that can be handled on that, and not everyone will agree with my statements, but that's at least how I saw it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
No, excellent question.
Thank you. Other questions?
Because I promise my future answers won't be as long. So can I throw out a question
Definitely.
to the attendees here? Is anyone brave enough to share how they felt seeing us pull out? Did anyone think about 1975 Saigon and kind of our pullout of Vietnam? How did people feel seeing really a kind of inglorious pullout from Afghanistan after 20 years of military and political investment there? How did people feel? I'm curious to hear anyone's thoughts on that. Well,
I know we have faculty in here and you hate it when your students don't talk. Anybody?
I know I hate it when mine don't talk.
I
Sir,
would
can
say-
I ask? Would
Well,
you
I
mind?
would say
Oh yeah, please.
that I was a little angry
Hmm.
and I was despairing a little bit because there was so much investment and for the people that did serve there and for the people who were so panicked about what we were doing when we were leaving, that we were just leaving them in a situation which they had no. I mean, what will they do? Where is their recourse at this point? I was very sad and very, well, I guess angry is my
Yeah.
default. So
If it was announced that we were going back in, would you be pleased with that news or not?
I don't think pleased would be a word I would use. I think there needs to be additional supports available, but I also have a lot of military in my family.
Mhm.
So I think that the jerking around of in and out is worse than we're going and we have a mission. Like, what is the mission here? What would our mission be to send military back in if we were going to be militarized and invading or if we went back in at this point? I think it's confusing for the boots on the ground, like, what is our purpose here? What is our function? Is this a political decision that we're making and I'm going to die for my country because of a political decision that was made because we didn't have a proper support in place when we left and we were there for 20 years, for crying out loud?
Exactly.
I don't know. That was,
Yeah, it wouldn't really be a good feeling. It wouldn't be a good feeling. And like, I think you're correct in saying it would be absolutely perceived as being kind of like a herky-jerky thing, and no one likes that. You can't really put confidence in herky-jerky. Yeah. So thank you for answering.
I have a question.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the talk, you referenced the idea of a superpower and what does it feel like, this idea that we as a superpower have pulled out. And I guess my question is, what do you think that term means now that we're no longer in the Cold War? Is that still a useful term? What does it mean? What should it mean?
Excellent question. So in one of our courses at Union College, I kind of put forth 4 elements of what makes us a superpower. 1, military force, and this kind of is derived from geostrategist Saul Cohen, from his book Geopolitics. But I tend to agree with Cohen's argument here that what makes us a superpower are 4 things. 1, military force, willingness to use it. 2, economic surplus, right? You have enough money and financial capacity and structure to maintain a military and its projection of force. 3, ideological leadership. People want to be you. People want to be you. They want to follow your leadership. Okay. So military force, willingness to use it, economic surplus, ideological leadership. And then the fourth aspect of being a superpower is having a cohesive government, right? A government that can hold everything together and can project its will, right? We still have all four of these. If you have all four, you're a superpower. If you're missing one, then you're not a superpower. You may be a regional power, what have you. We are a superpower because we have all four. After the Cold War ended, we're the only nation in the world that has all four of these. It's taking a battering, and the question with the pullout from Afghanistan is, do people want to follow us anymore? I think what tends to keep nations following the United States may be less love and more financial benefit. But you kind of don't want people just to follow you just because you're the global bank. You'd like for people to like you. It'd be nice if you were liked, right? Love may be a stretch, but if there are some notions of being liked, that'd be nice. We don't want to be so hard-handed that people are following us out of force or out of financial benefits. So that's why Afghanistan, in my mind, kind of matters to what it does to us as being a superpower, because are people not really believing in US power, and are they just following us for the financial benefits? And if the financial benefits fall off, then we lose ideological leadership and everyone just leaves us. And then we really lose everything. So, how do we come back from this loss in Afghanistan? Technically, I don't technically know, but one thing's for sure, we want people to have confidence in US leadership. We want to be liked as well as the financial benefits of leading the world.
One of the reasons I asked that is I'm an anthropologist. I was trained as a Latin Americanist, and I don't see that sort of ideological leadership anymore. I think we're competing with China economically in a lot of places, not just Latin America, but a lot of places around the globe. For that economic benefit, I think, sort of military assistance, things like that. But I don't see that ideological leadership really.
Yeah.
I don't see
I
it
think
working.
you would know, and obviously, we don't have too much time left, but I trust you're aware of Organization of American States, obviously, and then CELAC, right? Where does it seem that Latin American states are kind of drifting towards? They're kind of drifting towards CELAC, right? It's their space where they can discuss Latin American issues without the shadow of the United States, as much as it is an Organization of American States. But I think you're correct. I think, are we seeing cracks in the glass, right? Are the 90s over? I'll say this quickly. Russia and China want to take advantage of the cracks in the glass. They want to pierce through ideological leadership. This is why Biden met with Putin virtually just a couple of days ago. Putin wants to disrupt the United States power. He wants to crack the world following the United States. I don't think he'll be fully successful, but my goodness, he's trying. And the first thing that happened in Afghanistan is that when we left, Russia and China moved in. They moved in. And that's worrying for me as a geopolitical scientist. That's worrisome to me. I don't want to see Russia and China move in. They're disruptors. I want to enjoy Christmas. I enjoy swiping my credit card, and Russia and China will have to move out of the way for that to continue. So I'll say this very last thing. I know we're closing here. I'll say this very last thing, that when we left Afghanistan officially, Russia and China moved in. If you read the New York Times or any other news source, the CIA director went back in to discuss with the Taliban and tried to keep a footprint in there. So what does that look like in the future? I don't know, but we don't want Russia and China in there. Anyway.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Banks. This was amazing and so informative, especially with all of the refugees that we've got coming in. Good to have some background and some understanding so that we can kind of approach with a better and more thoughtful approach, I guess, was what I'm getting at. So thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone for being here today. Hope everyone has a lovely, peaceful break. And we look forward to seeing everyone back in January. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Great questions. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.